Welcome to Intertek's Healthy Building Series, a forum dedicated to exploring the crucial intersection of design, construction, and the goal of creating healthy, environmentally responsible, and efficient buildings. Today's discussion centers on indoor air quality, and our subject matter expert is Jeremy Jernigan, Chief Scientist for Industrial Hygiene for Intertek's Building and Construction Division. Jeremy, thanks so much for being with us today. For those who don't know who you are, can you share with everyone your background and current role with Intertek?
Sure. Thanks, Shawn. It's great to be here. Well, by trade, I'm a certified industrial hygienist, and I've spent about 20 years with Intertek and maybe 5 or so years in the power sector outside of Intertek. My goal is to help our industrial hygiene service line produce a quality product and be a technical resource for those people and for anybody that wants to give me a call and discuss industrial hygiene.
Awesome. I appreciate that intro. So let's dive right into this. So this topic's on indoor air quality. So I thought I'd start by just asking you, when you think of indoor air quality, what are we really talking about?
Well, I guess the name says it all. We study the quality of indoor air and how that affects the occupants of a building. And there are many components when we say air quality. It can be temperature, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, relative humidity, airborne particulate matter, and the list goes on. But we look at all of these parameters and try to identify scenarios that are most optimal for the occupants of the facility.
And again, I would make the assumption this is a pretty big deal. We all are in our particular environments, and the level of air quality can be critical. Can you kind of lay out for the viewers kind of a timeline, both in the kind of the construction industry and probably more recently with COVID, and how things may or may not have changed when it comes to indoor air quality?
Yeah, indoor air quality it's a huge subject and it's been discussed for quite a long time. So we recognize that the basics, the temperature of the air, the relative humidity, those have significant impact on the comfort level of the occupants. As time went on, we recognize that there are also other factors that may impact the comfort level. And it's not just whether they're hot or cold, it can be things like respiratory irritation, odors. So that really came into play more recently, and then COVID came along. And after that, we recognized that ventilation is one of the primary factors in addressing viral transmission within a structure. So that is one of the key things we're focusing on now, making sure we have adequate ventilation within the facility, adequate filtered ventilation.
Has anything changed since COVID as far as any requirements or regulations or any of that? Or is it just a higher awareness of what's going on when it comes to air quality control?
I think it's a higher awareness. There are discussions and new information comes in all the time. We do have individuals that are pressing the subject regarding ventilation. And with increased ventilation, we're also addressing all the other factors that besides COVID or viruses that really benefit from increased ventilation.
So one of the other terms we hear about is indoor environmental quality. How is that the same or different than indoor air quality?
Well, sometimes they're used interchangeably, but they are very different. So indoor environmental quality encompasses indoor air quality, but also includes many other factors. It can include lighting, acoustics or sound, the potable water. Generally, how does the occupant interact with the structure, and how does that structure affect the occupant? It's more inclusive.
So is indoor air quality a subset of that? If you are looking at indoor environmental quality and how that is treated, I suppose from a design standpoint, is that a subsection of that?
It is a subset. So what we'll get into, I guess, in a bit about the Healthy Buildings programs. But indoor air quality is a portion of what they look at. Some programs actually look at indoor environmental quality as well.
Okay, great. Let's get a little bit more now into the indoor air quality. One of the things that we want to talk about are the four major indoor air pollutants. Can you speak about that?
So the four primary indoor air contaminants that we're most concerned with are carbon dioxide, airborne particulate matter, volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. Normally you'll hear that term, and ozone. There are other concerns which include carbon monoxide. If you're in a space where combustion equipment is nearby, there's mold mold in buildings, of course, with the associated moisture issues. And radon can be a concern. Depending on the geology of your area, it is naturally present in the soils.
Now, I asked pollutants, you mentioned contaminants. Is that pretty much the same? Is that interchangeable?
It is contaminants is a nicer way to say pollutants.
Okay, good. Good to know. So what are the five main factors that affect IAQ?
The first would be ventilation. To me, that's the primary. Poor ventilation leads to higher concentrations of indoor air contaminants, which could be many different things. The second would be filtration. So if we use the lower efficiency filters, it doesn't necessarily remove all those fine particulate matter like smoke from the outside air. The filtration can be poorly fit. So you have these gaps around the edges of your filters, and it's not allowing those contaminants to be captured. And maintenance, that's another key component with your filtration. They do need to be maintained. They do need to be changed. The third is outdoor air quality. So some regions they have incidences of high concentrations of particulate matter, maybe ozone. And if the HVAC system isn't properly designed to address those factors, you can have poor indoor air quality. The fourth, it's a big one. It's the one that we always talk about is indoor sources. So the finishes, if you put in new carpet, if you paint, those VOCs that are emitted, fixtures and furniture. So you bring in a new piece of furniture. Well, sometimes that furniture can emit like formaldehyde. Cleaning chemicals. How many different cleaning chemicals do we use every day? Those are well known to produce vapors that will impact indoor air quality. If you're working in an office, your copy machine, well, those are known to produce ozone. But if we're going to talk about one that is in the home, is your vacuum cleaner. So if you have an old vacuum cleaner that has a bag filter and it has fairly low efficiency, you're likely going to resuspend those particulates and may end up causing a little bit of irritation. Lastly, number 5, indoor moisture. So water intrusion is a huge issue. You want to make sure your building envelope is sealed and secure. You can have temperature differentials that cause condensation on surfaces and make an environment conducive for mold growth. And as we know, mold growth, it produces spores that are likely allergenic and irritant, and some can lead to other more serious health issues.
You know, it's interesting because I kind of see it as two parts here. One is some of the contaminants that you may bring into your space. You talk about cleaners, vacuums, things like that. And I've been reading more and more about that. And the other aspect is how do you control that? If you don't bring it in is one thing, but if they are in the space, how do you control that with the ventilation system? Is that kind of a practical way to look at it, what you're bringing in, but then if the things you are bringing in, how do you control that within the space?
Sure, that's a properly designed air conditioning system, whether it be your home or an office space or other commercial space. Having a properly designed system is key. And with that, that system should be rated to handle your higher efficiency filtration. And that really is key, maintaining those filters to make sure that the particulate matter is captured. And that's specific to particulate matter. That won't necessarily address your VOCs and odors. A properly designed system, especially in a commercial space, will also include outdoor makeup air to dilute the VOCs and maybe dissipate that odor some.
That's quite interesting. So if we talk about how do you treat indoor air quality issues that we're talking about, how are those treated?
Well, first you have to recognize it. So once we recognize that a condition exists, we need to evaluate the specific concern because the concern, whether it be respiratory irritation or odors, the sources may be different. And depending on what we find, you need to introduce some controls, and those controls may be not using a certain chemical or substituting a chemical, changes in your practices and how you clean or what others, in any other circumstance that may lead to that condition. Increase your ventilation, improve your filtration, and sometimes, rarely, but sometimes you can add the supplemental filtration devices, those portable devices. So with a new building, the HVAC system needs to be properly designed, specifically targeting enhanced IAQ and making sure that those fixtures and everything, the interior design includes furniture that has low VOC emissions and making sure that envelope stays intact to avoid the water intrusion issue. Many construction sites now or construction activities require an indoor air quality management plan, and it encompasses all these things that I was just discussing and makes sure through documentation that those conditions were taken care of or addressed.
So Jeremy, along these lines, then what type of services does Intertek, you and your team provide, and who are you providing those services for?
Well, on the design side, we are very active in healthy buildings programs where we look at the indoor air quality prior to occupancy. We can also help out with general lead consulting. But as far as indoor air quality is concerned, we perform verification testing on that. And on the backside after occupancy, we look at buildings for compliance with the indoor air quality plans. We can look at complaints, and really that's what we mainly do is address occupant complaints. Those complaints are typically registered with the owner and coming in and trying to figure out where that source is, what is causing the poor indoor air quality condition that is perceived to be present.
And I'm assuming most of the work you guys do is in the commercial space. Is that true?
It is very much so. It is in the commercial space. We do work for large residential complexes, but mostly commercial. And it is typically we work for building owners. We actually started working a lot with the building management companies. And that's typically who we will do the indoor air quality work for is the building owner, though.
You mentioned mold, and it just seems like it's such a big topic right now with black mold and mold, particularly with, we're both in Florida and there's a lot with issues with water right now. Is that a big part of IAQ? Because it just seems so topical right now when it comes to mold, both residential and commercial spaces.
It is. My opinion is mold is so easily seen that once you have observed it, there's a concern there. And at that point, you have a condition. The hidden mold we'll typically address through building investigation, maybe some air samples, maybe some surface samples, but a thorough investigation of the facility. Black mold, that's kind of a pejorative term, but mold is mold. It can be allergenic. Some of them can be toxigenic or pathogenic, but we take these circumstances on a case-by-case basis, and we'll provide a recommendation for how, if we do find anything, a recommendation for how it should be addressed.
Okay, great. So can you explain the process of testing and verifying compliance with healthy building programs for IAQ performance criteria? And, what are the typical timelines that would be involved with this process?
Sure. Healthy buildings programs. We've seen great interest in the last few years, probably 10 years plus. The major programs that we do work with are LEED, WELL, but there are Fitwell, Green Globes, Live Well, among other programs. These programs, they generally address how the occupant interacts with the building and the building's impact on the environment. One component in each of these programs is the measuring of indoor air quality prior to and during the occupancy of the structure to determine whether the specific parameters are within the threshold of the generally accepted reference standards that we use. These parameters can include carbon monoxide, ozone, airborne particulate matter, the VOCs I've mentioned frequently, but depending on the size of the structure or the renovation area, field testing should be able to be completed within 2 to 3 days. It depends on, again, we had a project where we collected 100 plus samples, so it took about a week to get the field work done. But after about a week or two after we received the laboratory results, we should be able to have that report generated for you.
Well, we've been talking a lot about LEED and WELL and sustainability in our Healthy Building series. Does Intertek and yourself, do you get involved with architects and designers on the front end trying to meet some of these requirements for these programs, or is that something you guys come in later?
Well, we do. We can provide lead consulting. We generally work with lead consultants on the verification testing. And as far as we perform the verification testing after the building has been basically finished, the construction's been finished and prior to occupancy. But most of our work is with the verification testing.
So Jeremy, can you share some examples of past projects where you've successfully implemented strategies to achieve acceptable IAQ and what some of those challenges were in creating those successes?
Oh, I sure can. This will be a fun one. Specifically, we worked for a school district where they were seeing regular complaints concerning headaches, stuffiness, odors, and other concerns. And as we were investigating several schools over a period of time, we learned that many of the structures had separate outdoor makeup air systems, kind of like an air conditioning system, but it draws air directly from the outside. And these systems were either turned off or not maintained, leading to inadequate fresh air exchanges within the building. You get elevated CO2 and odors can be a result of that. So the systems were returned to an operational condition, and the IAQ complaint significantly decreased after they addressed that concern. The same school system also implemented a energy management program that essentially shut down the air conditioning systems in significant portions of the campuses during the summer. This allowed temperatures and relative humidity to increase to the range that it was conducive to fungal growth. So after that finding, their program was revised to maintain a certain amount of conditioned air during the summertime or during the period of inactivity.
So are schools a typical, I mean, if we kind of look at the type of buildings that you get involved with, are schools typical as well as what, office buildings, and what would be your typical projects that you get involved with, the types?
Well, schools are a huge part of our work. It revolves around indoor air quality, but we are introduced into the school system, well, initially because of asbestos. So as we're working with asbestos, that has an air component. So we are also brought in for indoor air quality issues. And yeah, we do significant work within school systems. Commercial buildings is also a significant area that we work in. It could be office space, it could be retail space, and some industrial. We actually are increasing our industrial work recently too, specifically with indoor air quality.
So I guess it's fair to say any space where there's people, there would be a potential need or opportunity for air quality control, right?
Very much so, because they're the ones that are going to be experiencing the discomfort. So they are going to be registering complaints, and we have the methods to assess those complaints and try to find that cause and some mitigation.
Great. Well, Jeremy, thank you again for sharing your insights and expertise on this important topic. Your perspective on indoor air quality and its impact on healthy building designs are invaluable to our audience. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add or any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and to let you know Intertek is a full service environmental provider. We can do not only indoor air quality, but contamination assessment and remediation of soil and groundwater, industrial hygiene. I should have said that first because I'm an industrial hygienist. So your general industrial hygiene, but we would be glad to help you.
Great. Well, that concludes today's discussion. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you back for our next conversation. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.